What do you think? Should she be sacked?
Hi. Well, I think the whole government should be sacked because all they've done is create division. When they should be bringing the country together, they've created more and more division, turning groups against groups. That's just part of it, what Suella has done. I have to say, I was really reassured yesterday. I was reassured by the Met Police allowing democracy to go ahead, and I was reassured by the Royal British Legion agreeing that the march should go ahead. I obviously didn't like the right-wing people, but I still believe they should be able to protest. And that's what people like my grandfather fought for. He fought for us to be able to express our views and opinions. And I'm really glad the way that the police managed it. I think I've got so much admiration for the Met, and I never had admiration for police before yesterday.
It's interesting, isn't it? The more that Suella Braverman attacks the police, the more I think public sympathy extends to them, because you see how difficult the situation was for them yesterday. Nine of them were injured. 2 of them ended up in hospital.
I know. They were fabulous. They were fabulous.
They do a very difficult job.
Yes. No, I was so impressed with how the police handled it. I thought, oh, here we go. The police are going to back Suella. It's going to be an absolute nightmare. This is more of our rights going. And they didn't. They stood up to her, and I was so proud of them. And I felt they were there for me rather than the government. I mean, I didn't go on the march, but I was there in spirit, on the Palestinian march. I was there in spirit, and I thought they were absolutely brilliant.
Do you think the Home Secretary then was wrong to try and influence the police?
I think she knew exactly what she's doing. She's just trying to get people fighting each other rather than looking at how bad the Conservative Party are running this country, how they're selling off England, basically, or selling off Britain to all their rich mates. You know, she's just trying to divert attention from that.
Okay.
So by getting us to fight each other.
All right, Bronwen, thank you so much for your call. So Bronwen thinks the Met did an exemplary job yesterday. Let's talk to James now, because he's in Windsor and he was at the Cenotaph yesterday, weren't you, James? What did you see when you were down there?
Well, what I saw was when I followed a load of far-right protesters, and all they were singing was "England till I die," which I didn't think was particularly offensive. I walked through and I thought the police were being a bit heavy-handed. They were out in large numbers. While we were at the Cenotaph, when I say we, I just went down on my own. I was bored. And basically I heard the incident which has been put on your website and is on other social media. I don't know what happened. I wasn't there. While I was there was this strange mix of, nice old ladies, handing out the service brochure, and some what would be described as far-right thugs. Now, the thing is, I'm not a far-right thug. They were chanting a little bit at the back. And, by the way, I live in a tent, by the way. I'm a little bit on the sort of the mental health side. I went over and told them to shut up. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I think they were so stunned that they did. And during the service, the has been reported, it was fairly silent. I went over there to find out what was going on. When I went over to the Palestinian march, which, it was a long way away, your first caller is spot on. There is blatant anti-Semitic chanting being said at those marches.
Did you hear it then? Did you hear it, James?
I heard the "to the river, to the sea." That is the tip of the iceberg, sir. That is the tip of the iceberg. You can find this on social media, the Kayaba chant. Now, I'm not going to say any further because basically the law is restricting what I may or may not say. The Kayaba chant is a genocidal chant against the Jewish people, and we have anti-Semitism back on the streets of this country, and I stand with Suella Braverman. She is totally right to speak up for the silent majority who are sick of extremists on our streets.
But there's a way of doing that, though, isn't there, James? There's a way of standing up against anti-Semitism, which none of us want to see on our streets. But there's a way of doing it which doesn't then inflame tension further by undermining the police and almost encouraging people to come out. And that's what people feel Suella Braverman has done here. Because you can stand up and say, we absolutely condemn anti-Semitism, and anyone who displays any anti-Semitism at these protests will be dealt with the full force of the law. But that's not what she did. She said that the police don't in fact, crack down enough on protesters who display various different offensive messages, and she undermined their operational independence, and she encouraged, in a way, people to come out and to oppose them themselves in this kind of vigilante way, because she was suggesting the police weren't going to do enough.
I don't think so. Okay, so shall we organise a march for the silent majority against the anti-Semitism that is taking place? I admire Keir Starmer. I'm not particularly Labour, but the trouble, he knows that this stuff is anti-Semitism. Chanting from the river to the sea is anti-Semitic. Dressing up in Hamas regalia is anti-Semitic.
But nobody's disagreeing with you, James. It's just how you deal with it. It's whether you deal with it by showing composure and strength and leadership and saying we condemn this and we are going to support the police all the way through to make sure these people are held and brought to justice, or whether you turn around and say, oh, the police aren't doing enough, they're awful, they're rubbish, and actually, I'm going to inflame tensions further, which is what some people feel Suella Braverman has done.
I don't think enough has been done to take these people who are saying the most vile chants, calling for genocide against Jews. That is disgusting, and she is quite right in saying that we need to have a debate about it.
Okay.
We have anti-Semitism on our streets, and I think it is about time the silent majority started reading up stuff like Kayaba, spelled Khaybar.
All right. James, thank you so much for your call. To Michael, who's in Rains Park. Hi, Michael.
Oh, good morning there, Paul. Thanks a lot for having me on. You had a text message just before the break saying that if this pro-Palestinian march had not taken place, then none of the violence that we saw yesterday or the arrests would have happened either. And of course, that's exactly what Suella Braverman was arguing for. So I find it utterly baffling that people are calling for her to be fired over a march that took place yesterday that she was arguing should be banned.
But it wasn't. It's not necessarily the march that people are saying she should be sacked over. It's the fact that we saw far right protesters coming out, counter protesting, causing trouble. So the suggestion is that the tensions had been inflamed in a way that was unnecessary.
Well, the point is, though, Paul, that this pro-Palestinian march, we've had pro-Palestinian marches for the last 3 weeks. The organisation behind them was warned that Armistice Day, you're no fool, Paul, you know how much Armistice Day matters to the British people, and they were warned this is a highly inflammatory day to be holding a march. Why don't you postpone it? Happy to have it on any other weekend day, but they went ahead with it. And of course, a reasonably foreseeable outcome of that was that you're going to bring some of the extreme right folks out. And another point that I would make about the police assessment on this is that we're always warned that the extreme right is sort of on the rise, and there are a million, folks out there in their bedrooms reading Mein Kampf and all the rest of it. But if that's the case, then why did the police come to the assessment that it was safe for this pro-Palestinian march to be taking place on Armistice Day? As far as I can see, Suella Braverman was warning about the consequences of this march, and the consequences were that there was quite a considerable amount of violence on the day.
But it's the language, though. It's the language that you use as a politician, because language does matter. It does influence the way people react to situations and the way that they perceive situations. And we said earlier on the show, she could have come out, and the Prime Minister could have come out and said, look, the Cenotaph's safe. We're policing that very, very militantly. We're going to make sure that nobody can get anywhere near the Cenotaph. Don't worry about that. So there's no point coming out and trying to get anywhere near the Cenotaph. You just won't. We're going to divert the pro-Palestinian protests away from the Cenotaph as they did, so that nobody can be disrespectful towards the Cenotaph, if indeed that is a risk. And that would have then meant that people didn't feel that there was this need to flood into London to counter-protest, to protect the Cenotaph, as some of them felt that they were doing. So the language that you choose as a politician does matter. I agree with you. These tensions were there to begin with. There was already a massive debate about Armistice Day and whether there should be protests. We had that debate 10 days ago when I was in on LBC. But the question is whether politicians should be inflaming those tensions or doing everything they can to talk them down, to damp them down, to make sure there's unity in the country.
Paul, I find it laughable that we have the first government in British history run by members of ethnic minorities in the three most powerful positions in government, and yet people in the media repeatedly try and paint this government as fascist.
I haven't tried to paint the government as fascist at all. I'm not saying that for a moment.
You haven't, Paul, but there are many people. I mean, I'm not a fan of everything that Suella has to say. I wouldn't use some of the language that she uses. However, I do think that the media get awfully wound up about some of the language that she does use and some of the policies that she tries to implement. I think there's an awful lot of hysteria about it,
Okay.
that is not frankly justified.
Michael, thank you so much for your call.